It's Dr. Gianna Reams, and in our first video heading into talking about the sources in a little bit more specific detail for Alexander in particular, I want to give you some guidelines because I hope that you do go out and pick up a copy of Arrian or Diodorus or Plutarch or Curtius and read through it. Sometimes when modern people go and they read these sources, they can feel very different and very distant in how they approach and talk about things. They don't elaborate in the same ways that we might today or expect. So first of all, how to think about these sources. They are more akin to our journalism or our modern creative nonfiction than they are to anything recognizable as academic history. In fact, academic history comes out of medieval juristic practices. This citing of sources is not really something that you find in the ancient historians. Sometimes they tell us what sources they're using, other times they don't. So we're not sure. And it depends. It can vary on the individual source itself. So that's the first thing to keep in mind, that we may not always know where they're getting this information. And in rare cases, it may be, of course, their own personal experience. So when Thucydides is talking about some aspects of the Peloponnesian War, he fought in it. But none of our sources on Alexander were present at any of the battles, although in a couple of cases, maybe they are citing people who are. But be aware that they are also creating entertainment. As I said, this is kind of creative nonfiction. So speeches, never ever assume that those speeches that you are reading are what they actually said. This is true even if you are reading what we call forensic speeches, or the writing down of law court speeches. So even written by Demosthenes, this is a cleaned up version of what he presented in court, but certainly within our historians. So when Arrian gives the famous Alexander speech at Opus, no, that is not what Alexander said. Okay, it is not a transcript. It may be in the general ballpark of he said some things like this, but this is not word for word what Alexander said. One of the things that ancient writers are doing is showing off their own literary chops. So Arrian is showing you how well he writes speeches, his rhetorical skills. He's not telling you what Alexander said, all right? So that's the first thing. Don't trust the speeches. Also, don't trust extended exchanges between characters. Once more, nobody's sitting there recording what people said. Now, with that, I will comment that their memories are better than our memories, but it's still not exact, okay? They are spicing things up. So instead of saying Parmenion and Alexander had a conversation about X, they give you the conversation. Okay. Speaking of Parmenion and Alexander, especially in Arrian, we have a trope. Now, what is a trope? A trope means a theme or a recurrent idea or such in the histories. And one of the tropes in Arrian is Alexander and Parmenion discuss a plan. Parmenion gives his advice, and Alexander shoots it down with a kind of a line like, well, if I were Parmenion, I would do X, but I am Alexander, and I'm going to do this. And of course, it's brilliant and it works. This is, we think, inserted later after Parmenion's death as kind of a way of nixing his reputation. So be aware of stuff like that and look for tropes. There's a lot of anti-Asian bias. Be aware of that, and tropes that enter into these histories that are assumptions about, well, you can't trust Asians, they lie, and they are slaves and such to their kings, and of course democracy is so much better, and on it goes. Okay, so be aware of those as well. And once more, those extended exchanges. Be also careful of anecdotes. Now, this you're going to find particularly in Plutarch. He loves them. But Plutarch changes players sometimes. In the anecdote has in one place Philip, in another place Demetrius, in another place, not even in Plutarch, it's Antipatris. Will the real speaker please stand up? Uh, they're flexible. Anecdotes are meant to kind of like parables, or they're meant to teach you something. There's a point to these anecdotes. They're fun too. Last, when you're reading this, think about the framing. Okay. And again, once more with Plutarch, but not just Plutarch. Look at how these things are lined up, especially when it comes to little stories. Sometimes we do take them piecemeal. Okay, well, this happened and then this happened, and that is not how the ancient historians are intending them. You need to look at where they are in the story. What is the arc? So a little literary skill never hurt anybody when it came to reading these, because they are literary works, even maybe before they are historical works. These guys are singing for their supper. They have to be successful at what they're doing. So they're sometimes reaching for the drama. Okay, so be aware of the framing. What else is happening around this? What might be the point that the historian has in telling this story and telling it now in this order? It may not necessarily be historical. Even Arrian, who everybody looks at as the good historian, even Arrian tells things out of order sometimes because he's making a point. Okay. So these are all things for you as the reader to take into these ancient histories and think about and think critically about them. Don't just read it and assume that they're telling you exactly how it happened. And this is what Alexander really said, and probably not. Okay. Every once in a while, you might get a little one-liner or such that really we're hearing Alexander's voice. Mostly we're not. Okay. So mostly we're not. So always take that little bit of doubt, that little critical reasoning with you into reading the histories. So we will then go forward and talk about our 5 major Alexander historians.